For my birthday, my wife gave me a gift box. My 10-year-old son looked at it and said, "Dad, don't open it." I asked, "Why?" "Can't you see it?" Looked closer and froze. I didn't open it. I did this instead. 30 minutes later, police were at the door. Look, I've never been the type of guy who makes a big deal out of birthdays. You know how some people go all out. Balloons everywhere. Cake that costs more than my grocery bill. Parties that last until the neighbors start complaining? Yeah, that's never been my thing. I'm more of a keep it simple, stupid kind of guy. Give me a quiet morning, maybe some decent coffee, and I'm good to go. So when I rolled out of bed that Saturday morning, the last thing on my mind was drama. Hell, I was actually looking forward to a chill day. The kitchen smelled like bacon and coffee. Bianca had been up early, doing her whole domestic goddess routine. She's always been like that, especially on special occasions. Makes everything look picture perfect, like we're living in some magazine spread. Eli was already at the table, shoving cereal into his mouth like he hadn't eaten in weeks. Kid's got an appetite that could bankrupt us, I swear. He looked up when I walked in, milk dripping down his chin, and grinned that gap-toothed smile that always makes my day. "Happy birthday, old man." Bianca called from the counter, not even turning around. I could hear the smirk in her voice. She loves giving me grief about my age, even though she's only 3 years younger. Hope you're ready for another year of me putting up with your nonsense. Lucky me. I shot back, grabbing my favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle that she keeps threatening to throw away. The coffee was perfect, strong enough to wake the dead, but not so bitter it made me wince. Bianca knows exactly how I like it, which is one of those little things that makes marriage work, you know? The small stuff matters more than people think. Eli was bouncing in his chair, that hyperactive energy that 8-year-olds seem to run on 24/7. Dad, guess what Mom got you?" he started, but Bianca shut him down real quick. "Eli, what did we talk about?" she said, finally turning around with that look. The one that says, "Zip it, kid," without actually saying it. He clamped his mouth shut, but his eyes were still dancing with excitement. Whatever was coming, he was pumped about it. That's when she brought out the box. Man, this thing was wrapped like it belonged in some fancy department store window. Perfect corners, ribbon that probably cost more than most people spend on lunch, the whole 9 yards. Bianca's always been particular about presentation. Everything has to look just right, you know? Sometimes I think she missed her calling as a party planner or something. "Go ahead," she said, setting it down in front of me like it was made of gold. "Open it up." I reached for it, and that's when Eli did something that stopped me cold. The kid grabbed my sleeve, not hard, but firm enough to get my attention. When I looked down at him, his face had changed completely. Gone was the excited, bouncing boy from 2 seconds ago. Now he looked, I don't know, worried? Scared? It was hard to tell, but whatever it wasn't good. "Dad?" he whispered, leaning in close like he was sharing some top-secret information. "Don't open it." I almost laughed. Kids say the weirdest stuff sometimes, right? Maybe he thought I should save it for later, or maybe he was just being dramatic the way kids do. But something in his voice made me pause. This wasn't his usual goofing around. This was serious Eli, the version of my son that only comes out when something's really bothering him. "Come on, buddy," I said, keeping my voice light. "It's just a present. What's the big deal?" But Eli wasn't backing down. He looked at me with those big brown eyes. His mom's eyes, and said something that made my blood run cold. "Can't you see it?" The way he said it, like I was missing something obvious, something important. I looked back at the box, really looked at it this time. And that's when I noticed the label. Nothing dramatic, nothing that screamed danger or anything like that. Just a regular shipping label, the kind you see on packages every day. But there was something about it, something that made my stomach twist up in knots. I tried to shake it off. This was my wife we were talking about, the woman I'd been married to for 10 years. The mother of my kid. She wouldn't hurt me, wouldn't set me up for anything bad. That was paranoid thinking, the kind of stuff you see in movies where everyone's out to get the main character. Real life doesn't work that way, right? But Eli's hand was still on my sleeve, and his grip was getting tighter. "Dad, please," he whispered again, and this time I could hear the fear in his voice. Real fear, the kind that makes your chest tight and your hands shake. I looked at the box again, then at my son, then at my wife who was watching us with this expression I couldn't quite read. Everything in the room felt different suddenly. like the air had gotten thicker or something. My perfect Saturday morning was starting to feel a lot less perfect, and I had no idea why. All I knew was that my 8-year-old son was scared of a birthday present, and that scared the hell out of me. The silence in the kitchen felt like it was stretching on forever. Bianca had gone back to whatever she was doing at the counter, humming some tune I didn't recognize, acting like nothing weird had just happened. But I couldn't shake the look on Eli's face, or the way his little hand was still gripping my sleeve like his life depended on it. My kid doesn't scare easily. He's the type who chases spiders instead of running from them, who thinks horror movies are hilarious instead of terrifying. So when he gets that look, that dead serious expression that makes him seem way older than 8, I pay attention. Eli, I said quietly, setting down my coffee mug and turning to face him completely. What do you mean? Can't you see it? See what, buddy? He glanced over at his mom, making sure she wasn't listening, then leaned in even closer. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper, the kind of tone kids use when they're about to tell you something they think might get them in trouble. The box, Dad. It looks exactly like the ones from Uncle Greg's garage. Uncle Greg, my brother-in-law, Bianca's younger brother, the guy who's been a walking disaster since the day I met him. Greg's one of those people who always has some scheme going. Always convinced he's on the verge of striking it rich with whatever half-baked idea he's cooking up this week. Most of the time, his plans fall apart before they even get started, but every once in a while, he manages to dig himself into some real trouble. You sure about that, kiddo? I asked, trying to keep my voice casual even though my heart was starting to pick up speed. I mean, a lot of boxes look the same, right? Eli shook his head firmly, that stubborn set to his jaw that he definitely inherited from his mother. No, Dad, I'm serious. It's got the same sticker on the bottom corner. You know, that weird orange one that looks like a circle with lines through it? And the tape, it's that shiny silver kind, not regular brown tape like most packages have. I felt my stomach drop. The kid was right. Greg always used that weird silver tape because he thought it made his packages look more professional. And that orange sticker. Hell, I remembered seeing those things all over his garage the last time we'd been over there. Some kind of shipping label from whatever sketchy operation he was running out of that converted storage space behind his house. When did you see Uncle Greg's boxes? I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew the answer. Bianca had taken Eli over to her brother's place a few weeks ago while I was working overtime. She'd said Greg needed help moving some stuff around, and Eli loved spending time with his uncle despite, or maybe because of, the guy's tendency to live like he was still in college. Remember when Mom took me over there to help him clean up? There were like 50 boxes just like this one, all stacked up in the back corner. Uncle Greg told me not to touch them because they were business stuff, but I saw the stickers and the tape. It's the exact same, Dad. I swear. My mind started racing back to what had happened with Greg about 6 months earlier. The whole mess had started small, or at least, that's how Bianca had explained it to me. Her brother had gotten involved with some guy who claimed to be an art dealer, importing stuff from overseas and selling it to collectors. Sounded legitimate enough, even if it was exactly the kind of get-rich-quick scheme that Greg usually fell for. But then things had gotten complicated. Real complicated. Turns out the art dealer was running a scam, selling fake paintings and sculptures with forged certificates of authenticity. The whole operation had been based out of Greg's storage unit, using his name and address for shipping. When the feds finally busted the ring, Greg had claimed he was just an innocent middleman, that he had no idea the artwork was fake. Bianca had defended him, of course. She always defended Greg, no matter how deep he dug himself. He's just misunderstood, she'd said when I'd suggested maybe her brother needed to find a more reliable line of work. Greg's got a good heart. He just trusts the wrong people sometimes. The charges had eventually been dropped, insufficient evidence or something like that, but the whole thing had left a bad taste in my mouth. I'd never completely bought Greg's innocent act, and I definitely didn't trust his judgment when it came to business partners. Now here was my son, telling me that my birthday present looked exactly like packages from Greg's garage. The same garage where he'd been storing fake artwork and forged documents. The same garage that had been raided by federal agents just 6 months ago. Dad, Eli's voice snapped me back to the present. You okay? You look kinda weird. I looked down at him, this smart, observant kid who'd just potentially saved me from walking into something terrible, and felt a mix of pride and terror wash over me. Pride because he was sharp enough to notice details that most adults would miss. Terror because if he was right, and my gut was telling me he was, then my wife had just handed me a package that could destroy my life. My hands were starting to shake, and I had to set my coffee mug down before I dropped it. The box sat there on the kitchen table, looking innocent enough with its perfect wrapping and fancy ribbon. But now all I could see were those orange stickers and that silver tape, the same materials that had gotten Greg tangled up with the feds. I was still staring at that damn box, my mind racing through all the possibilities, when I heard Bianca's footsteps coming back into the kitchen. The sound of her heels clicking on the tile floor made me jump, and I quickly tried to compose myself. The last thing I wanted was to tip her off that something was wrong. Not until I figured out exactly what I was dealing with. "Well," she said, and when I looked up, she was wearing this bright, expectant smile that would have seemed perfectly normal under different circumstances. Hell, it was the same smile she gave me every Christmas morning when she was excited about some gift she'd picked out. But now, knowing what Eli had just told me, that smile felt wrong somehow. Like she was trying too hard to look happy, like she was putting on a show. "Aren't you going to open it?" she asked, moving closer to the table. Her voice had that sing-song quality she used when she was really pleased with herself, the tone that usually meant she'd found something she thought I'd love. But there was something else underneath it, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. An edge, maybe? Like she was more anxious than excited? I forced myself to smile back, hoping it looked more convincing than it felt. "Yeah, of course," I said, reaching toward the box before quickly pulling my hand back. "I just wanna, savor the moment. You put so much work into the wrapping. It almost seems like a shame to tear it up." It was a bullshit excuse, and we both knew it. I'm not the type of guy who cares about fancy wrapping paper or presentation. Usually, I rip into presents like a kid on Christmas morning, getting paper everywhere while Bianca complains about the mess. But she didn't call me out on it. Instead, her smile got even brighter, if that was possible. "Oh, you're so sweet," she said, leaning down to kiss my cheek. Her lips felt cold against my skin, and I caught a whiff of her perfume, that expensive stuff she only wore on special occasions. "Take your time, honey. I just know you're going to love it." The way she said "love it" made my skin crawl. There was something about her tone, something that reminded me of a salesperson trying to close a deal. Like she was way too invested in my reaction, like my response to this gift mattered more than it should have for a simple birthday present. She straightened up and started humming again, that same tune from earlier, as she moved back toward the counter. The sound grated on my nerves in a way it never had before. Everything about her behavior felt off, like she was playing a role instead of just being my wife. And the more I watched her, the more convinced I became that Eli was right to be worried. My son was still sitting next to me, and I could feel his eyes on my face, watching my every reaction. The kid was smart, probably too smart for his own good sometimes, and I knew he could tell something was bothering me. When I glanced over at him, he gave me this tiny nod, like he was saying, "I told you so," without actually speaking. I looked back at the box, really studying it this time. The return address was printed on a white label, neat and professional looking. But it wasn't Bianca's handwriting, and it definitely wasn't from any store I recognized. The address was just a P.O. box number, no business name, or anything that would give me a clue about where this thing had actually come from. That struck me as weird, because Bianca usually ordered stuff online, and those packages always had company names and logos all over them. There was no gift tag either, which was unusual for her. She was the type who always included a little card with some sweet message, usually something cheesy that would make me roll my eyes and smile at the same time. But this box was just blank. Anonymous. Like someone had gone out of their way to make sure there was nothing that could be traced back to them. My hands were definitely shaking now, and I shoved them under the table so Bianca wouldn't notice. My heart was pounding so hard I was surprised she couldn't hear it from across the room. Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to open that box, to get it as far away from my family as possible. But I couldn't just sit there forever. I needed to do something, and I needed to do it without making Bianca suspicious. If this was connected to Greg's mess somehow, if my wife was involved in something illegal, then I needed help. Professional help. "You know what?" I said, pushing back from the table and standing up. "I think I'm going to save this for later. Maybe after lunch or something. I want to really enjoy it, you know?" Bianca's humming stopped abruptly. When I looked at her, that bright smile had faltered just a little, and for a split second, I saw something else in her eyes. Disappointment? Frustration? Fear? Whatever it was gone so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. "Oh," she said, and her voice sounded smaller somehow. "Okay, sure. Whatever you want, honey." But I could tell she wasn't okay with it. Not even close. Standing in my kitchen with 3 detectives examining what should have been a harmless birthday gift, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was bugging me. It wasn't just the contents of the box. Though those fake art pieces and certificates were bad enough. It was something about Bianca's behavior from earlier, the way she'd been so insistent that I opened the gift right away, like she was on some kind of timeline. "Give us a minute to catalog this stuff," Martinez said, spreading the contents across my kitchen table like evidence at a crime scene. Which, I was starting to realize, it probably was. "We need to photograph everything before we bag it." While they worked, I found myself replaying the morning in my head. Bianca's perfect wrapping job, her bright smile, the way she'd hummed that tune while moving around the kitchen. But there was something else, something that had been nagging at me since she'd brought the box out. Her voice had sounded different when she'd first mentioned the gift, more rushed, more nervous than excited. That's when I remembered the smart speaker sitting on the counter by the coffee maker. The damn thing was always listening, recording snippets of conversation whenever it picked up what it thought was a voice command. Bianca was constantly asking it about the weather or telling it to play music, and I'd set it up to keep a log of interactions for security purposes after we'd had some issues with random commands being triggered. "Hey, Ty," I said, pulling him aside while Martinez and Collins continued their documentation. "I might have something else you want to hear." He looked up from the notebook where he'd been jotting down observations. "What kind of something?" "Our smart speaker keeps audio logs of voice interactions. If Bianca said anything about this gift while she was in the kitchen earlier." I trailed off, suddenly worried about what we might find. "Can you access those logs without alerting anyone upstairs?" he asked, glancing toward the ceiling where we could hear footsteps moving around in the bedroom. "Yeah, it's all on my phone app. The speaker's been recording conversations all morning." I pulled out my phone with hands that were shakier than I wanted to admit. The app interface was simple enough, just a list of recorded interactions organized by time. The most recent entry was from about an hour ago, right around the time Bianca would have been getting the box ready to present to me. "Here," I said, showing Tyrell the screen. "This one's from 9:23 a.m. That's right before she brought the box into the kitchen." Martinez looked over when she heard us talking. "What VE you got?" "Smart speaker recording. Might have caught something before the gift exchange." "Play it," she said, setting down the camera she'd been using to document the certificates. I tapped the audio file, and the speaker on my phone crackled to life. At first, there was just background noise, the sound of someone moving around the kitchen, cabinet doors opening and closing. Then Bianca's voice came through, clear as day. "Alexa, what time is it?" she said, and the device's electronic voice responded with the time. But then there was more. Bianca's voice again, but this time she wasn't talking to the speaker. She was talking to someone else, and from the sound quality, it had to be a phone conversation on speaker mode. "I just hope he opens it before anyone else sees it," Bianca said, her voice carrying that nervous edge I'd noticed earlier. "You know how he is. Sometimes he saves presents for later, and we can't have that happening today." Another voice responded, female, with the slightly tinny quality of a speakerphone call. It took me a second to recognize it, but when I did, my stomach dropped. It was Camille, Bianca's older sister, the one who lived across town and worked in some kind of import business that she was always vague about when people asked for details. "He won't suspect anything," Camille said, her tone confident in a way that made my skin crawl. "You said it yourself. He's too trusting. Always has been. That's what makes him perfect for this." "I know, but what if—" "Stop worrying," Camille interrupted. "Everything's already in motion. The paperwork's been filed, the accounts are set up, and his name is on everything. By the time anyone figures out what's happening, it'll be too late to stop it." "But what if he doesn't?" "He will. He has to. You just need to make sure he opens that package and follows the instructions inside. Once he does that, we're home free." There was a pause in the recording, and I could hear Bianca moving around again. When she spoke next, her voice was quieter, almost guilty. "I hate that we're doing this to him. He's a good man, Camille. He doesn't deserve." Good men finish last. Camille cut her off again. Besides, it's not like we're trying to hurt him. We just need someone with a clean record to be the face of the operation. Someone the authorities would never suspect. And let's be honest, your husband is about as squeaky clean as they come. I suppose you're right. I know I'm right. Just stick to the plan, Bianca. Make sure he opens the box. Make sure he follows through. And in 6 months, we'll all be sitting pretty. He'll thank us eventually. The recording ended there, cutting off abruptly as the smart speaker stopped listening. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. I looked around at the 3 detectives, all of whom were staring at my phone like it had just confessed to murder. Well, Colin said finally, that's not good. Tyrell was shaking his head, his expression a mix of anger and disappointment. Man, I'm sorry. I know this isn't easy to hear, but I wasn't feeling sorry for myself anymore. The hurt and confusion I'd been carrying all morning had crystallized into something else entirely. Rage. Pure, white-hot fury at the woman upstairs who I'd trusted with my life, my home, and my son's future. The woman who'd apparently been planning to use me as a patsy in whatever scheme she and her sister had cooked up. The envelope, I said, pointing to the sealed letter that was still sitting on the table among the other evidence. That's probably the instructions Camille was talking about. The ones I was supposed to follow. Martinez nodded grimly. We'll need to process all of this as evidence. And we're going to need you to come down to the station to give a formal statement. What about Bianca? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. That depends on what else we find, she said. But based on what we just heard, she's got some serious explaining to do. The detectives had been gone for about 3 hours when I heard Bianca's footsteps coming down the stairs. I'd been sitting in the living room, staring at the TV without really watching it, trying to process everything that had happened. Eli was upstairs in his room, probably playing video games and blissfully unaware that his world was about to get turned upside down. I'd told him that the police visit was just routine neighborhood stuff, and being 8 years old, he'd accepted that explanation without question. But now I had to face my wife, the woman who'd shared my bed for 10 years, who'd given birth to my son, who I'd trusted more than anyone else in the world. The woman who'd apparently been planning to destroy my life as some kind of birthday surprise. She walked into the kitchen first, probably looking for that damn box. When she didn't find it there, I heard her moving around, opening cabinets and checking the counter like maybe she'd misplaced it somewhere. Then she appeared in the living room doorway, and the look on her face told me she already knew something was wrong. Where's the box? She asked, but her voice wasn't quite right. Too controlled, too careful, like she was trying really hard to sound casual and failing miserably. I didn't look away from the TV. The police took it. The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. When I finally turned to look at her, Bianca had gone pale, not just regular pale, but that sickly white color people get when they've just received devastating news. Her mouth was hanging open slightly, and she was gripping the doorframe like she needed it to stay upright. She started, then stopped, swallowing hard. You called them. Yeah, I called them. I stood up, turning to face her fully. Funny thing about that box, Bianca, my son recognized it. Said it looked exactly like the packages from your brother's garage. You remember Greg's garage, right? The one where he was storing all that fake artwork. She didn't deny it. That was the thing that really got to me. She didn't even try to pretend she didn't know what I was talking about. Instead, she just stood there looking guilty as hell, like a kid who'd been caught with her hand in the cookie jar. Why would you do that? She whispered, and there was something in her voice that might have been genuine hurt. You didn't even talk to me first. You called the police on me. Because our son recognized it, I said, my voice getting louder despite my efforts to stay calm. Because I trusted him more than I trusted you. And you know what? Turns out that was the right call. She flinched like I'd slapped her. What's that supposed to mean? It means they found some pretty interesting stuff in that box. Art forgeries, fake certificates, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. Ring any bells? Bianca's face cycled through about 5 different expressions in the span of 2 seconds. Denial, fear, anger, and finally something that looked almost like relief. Like she was tired of carrying around whatever secret she'd been holding. It was supposed to be quiet, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Quiet. I felt my temper starting to slip, and I had to clench my fists to keep from doing something I'd regret. Quiet like framing me? quiet like setting me up to take the fall for whatever you and Greg had going on. It wasn't like that, she said quickly, taking a step into the room. We weren't trying to hurt you. We were trying to protect you. Protect me? By making me an accessory to art fraud? By using my name without my permission? That's your idea of protection? You don't understand, she said, and now there were tears starting to form in her eyes. Greg was in trouble. Real trouble. Those people he was working with before, they weren't just going to let him walk away. They wanted their money back, plus interest, and he didn't have it. So you decided to drag me into it? We needed someone clean. Someone with no criminal record, no suspicious connections. Someone the authorities would never suspect of being involved in anything illegal. She was crying openly now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. You were perfect for it. Perfect for it. Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. All these years, I'd thought she'd married me because she loved me, because she wanted to build a life together. But apparently, what she'd really wanted was a fall guy. Someone squeaky clean enough to use as a front for her family's criminal enterprises. So this was all planned. I asked, though I already knew the answer. How long, Bianca? How long have you been setting this up? She didn't answer right away, just stood there crying and wringing her hands like she was trying to figure out how to spin this in a way that wouldn't make her look like a complete sociopath. Camille had the idea about 6 months ago, she finally admitted. After Greg's first case got dismissed. She said it was only a matter of time before he got caught up in something else, and when that happened, we needed to be ready. 6 months. They'd been planning this for 6 months, probably longer. All those times Bianca had seemed distracted, all those phone calls with her sister that had stopped abruptly when I walked into the room, all those occasions when she'd been unusually interested in my work schedule and my business contacts. It had all been research, gathering information they could use to build their trap. The funny thing is, I said, moving closer to her, I probably would have helped Greg if you'd just asked. If you'd told me he was in trouble, if you'd been honest about what was going on, I would have found a way to help him. But instead, you decided to lie to me. You decided to use me. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. But it did go this far. And now there's no going back. My heart was breaking, but not just because my marriage was over. It was breaking because I realized that the woman I'd fallen in love with, the woman I'd built my entire adult life around, might never have existed at all. Maybe Bianca had always been this person. This calculating, manipulative stranger who saw relationships as transactions and people as tools to be used when convenient. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? My wife was in the guest bedroom down the hall. We'd agreed she should stay there until we figured out what came next, and every time I closed my eyes, I kept hearing that recording. Camille's voice saying I was perfect for their scheme, Bianca agreeing that I was too trusting for my own good. The whole thing played on repeat in my head like some kind of nightmare I couldn't wake up from. By the time my phone rang at 8:30 the next morning, I was already dressed and sitting at the kitchen table with my third cup of coffee, staring out the window and wondering how the hell my life had gotten so screwed up in less than 24 hours. You might want to sit down, Tyrell said when I answered, though his voice sounded different than usual. More formal, like he was calling in his official capacity rather than as my friend. Already sitting, I said. What VE you got? More than we bargained for, that's for sure. The contents of that box? They're tied to something way bigger than just Greg's local art scam. We're talking international here, man. Money laundering, document forgery, the whole 9 yards. I felt my stomach drop. How international are we talking? The kind that gets the FBI interested. The kind that involves shell companies in 3 different countries and bank accounts that trace back to some very unfriendly places. Your brother-in-law wasn't just dealing with small-time crooks. He was mixed up with people who make the local crime families look like Boy Scouts. Jesus Christ, I muttered, running a hand through my hair. And they wanted to use me as their front man? Gets worse, Tyrell continued, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. Greg's already under investigation again. Has been for about 2 months now. Different case, same kind of bullshit. Fake documents, fraudulent art sales, money moving through accounts that don't exist on paper. 2 months? But Bianca said, your wife's been lying to you about more than just that birthday present. According to our records, Greg's been in and out of federal custody 3 times since his first case got dismissed. Each time, The charges have been dropped due to insufficient evidence or procedural errors, but the pattern's there. Someone's been very carefully orchestrating things to keep him just barely on the right side of legal. That hit me like a freight train. All those times Bianca had mentioned visiting her brother, all those family dinners where Greg had seemed nervous and distracted, all those occasions when the conversation had stopped abruptly when I walked into the room. It hadn't been normal family drama. It had been damage control for an ongoing criminal operation. But here's the thing that's really going to piss you off, Tyrell said, his voice getting grimmer. Your name's already in the system, not as a suspect, but as a person of interest in Greg's latest case. What the hell does that mean? It means someone's been using your identity for months. Bank accounts, business registrations, rental agreements. There's a whole paper trail with your name on it, and none of it traces back to anything you actually did. My coffee mug slipped from my hands and shattered on the kitchen floor, sending hot liquid and ceramic shards everywhere. But I barely noticed. All I could think about was the implications of what Tyrell was telling me. If my name was already connected to Greg's activities, if there were bank accounts and business documents with my signature on them. Tyrell, I need you to email me something, I said, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. Whatever paperwork you found with my name on it. I need to see it. Already on it. Check your inbox in about 30 seconds. I grabbed my laptop from the counter, stepping carefully around the broken mug, and opened my email. Tyrell's message was sitting at the top of my inbox with 3 attachments. The first was a bank account application for something called Artisan Echo LLC. The second was a warehouse rental agreement in downtown Baltimore. The third was a business registration document filed with the state of Maryland. All 3 had my name on them. All 3 had what looked like my signature. All 3 were dated within the last 4 months. Have you ever heard of a company called Artisan Echo? Tyrell asked. Never in my life, I said, scrolling through the documents. And I sure as hell never signed any of these papers. The signature was good, really good. If I hadn't known for certain that I'd never seen these documents before, I might have believed I'd signed them myself. But there were subtle differences, little quirks in the way the letters connected that told me someone had been practicing my handwriting for a while before they felt confident enough to forge official documents. The email address on these forms, Tyrell continued, it's not yours either, right? I looked at the contact information listed on the business registration. The email was email protected, and the phone number had a local area code but wasn't one I recognized. Definitely not mine. I've never even heard of that domain. We tried calling the number. Goes straight to voicemail, but the greeting is a man's voice saying he's the operations manager for Artisan Echo and to leave a detailed message. Sound familiar? No, but I'm betting if you ran a voice analysis, it would come back as a match for Greg. That's what we're thinking too. The whole operation was designed to look legitimate on paper, with you as the face of the company and Greg handling the day-to-day operations behind the scenes. If anything went wrong, if the authorities started sniffing around, Greg could claim he was just an employee following orders from his boss, you. I felt sick. These people, my wife's family, had been systematically stealing my identity for months, building an entire criminal enterprise around my name and reputation. They'd opened bank accounts I didn't know about, rented warehouse space I'd never seen, and filed business documents that made me legally responsible for whatever they were planning to do. The warehouse, I said, thinking out loud. Have you guys checked it out yet? Drove by yesterday evening. Place looks legitimate from the outside. Clean, well-maintained, the kind of spot you'd expect an import business to operate out of. But we need a warrant before we can go inside, and that's going to take some time. How much time? Could be a few days, could be a week. Depends on how backed up the courts are and whether the prosecutor thinks we have enough evidence to justify the search. A few days. Meanwhile, Greg and whoever else was involved in this thing would have plenty of time to clean out the warehouse, destroy evidence, and disappear into whatever hole they'd crawled out of. And I'd be left holding the bag for whatever crimes they'd committed using my name. There's one more thing, Tyrell said, his voice getting even more serious. The PayPal account linked to Artisan Echo, it's been active for the last 6 weeks. Lots of small transactions, mostly payments for what look like shipping services and storage fees. But there are also some larger deposits. We're talking 5- and 6-figure amounts from overseas accounts. Money laundering? That's what it looks like. Clean money going in, dirty money coming out. with Artisan Echo serving as the middleman. And since your name's on all the paperwork, he didn't need to finish the sentence. If the authorities decided to prosecute, I'd be the one facing charges for money laundering, fraud, and whatever else they could prove. Greg would probably cut a deal to testify against me, claiming he was just following orders from his legitimate business partner. Bianca would play the innocent wife who had no idea what her husband was really doing. It was perfect. Absolutely fucking perfect. The next 72 hours felt like living inside a tornado. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. First it was Tyrell with updates from the investigation. Then it was Detective Martinez with follow-up questions. Then it was people I'd never heard of calling about bank accounts and business dealings I knew nothing about. Each conversation made it clearer that the web of lies surrounding my life was bigger and more complicated than I'd ever imagined. Tuesday morning, I was sitting in my home office trying to make sense of a stack of financial documents that Martinez had dropped off the night before when my phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but after everything that had happened, I was paranoid about missing something important. "This is Robert Chen from First National Bank," the voice on the other end said. "I'm calling about some irregularities we've discovered in your business account. Do you have a few minutes to discuss this?" My business account? I'd been banking with First National for 15 years, but I only had a personal checking account and a small savings account there. "I think you might have the wrong person," I said. "I don't have a business account with your bank." There was a pause, and I could hear computer keys clicking in the background. "Sir, according to our records, you opened a business checking account with us 3 months ago under the name Artisan Echo LLC. The account has been quite active, with deposits totaling over $200,000 in the last 6 weeks alone." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. $200,000. Moving through an account I'd never opened, under a business name I'd never heard of until yesterday, using my identity and probably my forged signature. "Mr. Chun, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I never opened that account. Someone's been using my identity fraudulently." "Oh," he said, and his tone shifted immediately from professional courtesy to serious concern. "Sir, if that's the case, we need to freeze the account immediately and begin a fraud investigation. Are you able to come in today to file a report?" "Absolutely. What time? How soon can you be here?" 2 hours later, I was sitting in a sterile conference room at First National with Mr. Chun, a bank security specialist, and a federal investigator who'd been called in because of the amount of money involved. The paperwork spread across the table told a story that made my blood run cold. The account had been opened with a copy of my driver's license, my social security number, and what appeared to be my signature on all the necessary forms. But when I looked closer at the documents, I could see subtle differences in the signature that confirmed what I already knew. Someone had been practicing my handwriting for months before they felt confident enough to open this account. The interesting thing, the federal investigator said, is the pattern of deposits. Most of them are wire transfers from overseas accounts, specifically from shell companies in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland. That's a classic money laundering setup. Dirty money goes offshore, gets cleaned through a series of transfers, and comes back into the U.S. financial system looking legitimate. "And the withdrawals?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "Mostly cashier's checks made out to shipping companies and storage facilities. Someone's been using this account to fund a physical operation, probably the warehouse we found listed under your name." The warehouse. I've been trying not to think about that, but apparently I couldn't avoid it anymore. "Have you guys gotten that search warrant yet?" Mr. Chen looked confused, but the federal investigator nodded grimly. "Executed it this morning. You're not going to like what we found." He opened a manila folder and pulled out a stack of photographs. The first few showed the exterior of a nondescript warehouse in an industrial part of Baltimore. Exactly the kind of place you'd drive past without giving it a second thought. But the interior shots told a different story entirely. The warehouse was packed with artwork. Paintings, sculptures, decorative pieces, hundreds of items arranged on shelves and tables like some kind of bizarre art gallery. At first glance, it might have looked like a legitimate import business, but when I looked closer at the photos, I could see the telltale signs of a forgery operation. Workstations with half-finished pieces, chemical baths for aging new paintings to look antique, and stacks of blank certificates waiting to be filled out with fake provenance information. Conservative estimate puts the value of the items in that warehouse at somewhere between $2 and $3 million, the investigator said. Of course, that's assuming they were genuine, which they're not. The actual value is probably closer to $50,000, the cost of the materials and labor to produce convincing fakes. Jesus, I muttered, flipping through the photos. And my name was on the lease for this place? Your name, your signature, your credit report used as backing for the rental agreement. Whoever set this up knew exactly what they were doing. They needed someone with a clean record and good credit to serve as the front for the operation. That phrase again, someone with a clean record. I was starting to hate those words. My entire adult life, I'd worked hard to build a good reputation, to pay my bills on time, to stay out of trouble and be a responsible citizen. And all of that effort had just made me a more attractive target for people who wanted to use my identity as camouflage for their crimes. There's more, the investigator continued, pulling out another set of documents. We found a computer in the warehouse with detailed records of the operation. Customer lists, payment schedules, shipping manifests, everything you'd need to prosecute a major fraud case. But here's the interesting part. According to these records, you were supposed to be the one managing the day-to-day operations. He showed me printouts of what looked like internal memos and email exchanges. All of them were written as if I was the boss giving instructions to Greg and several other people I didn't recognize. The emails discussed shipping schedules, quality control for the forgeries, and strategies for avoiding detection by customs officials. The email account all of this came from, he said, pointing to the header on one of the printouts. It's the same one that was listed on your business registration. Someone's been sending emails in your name for months, probably using it to coordinate the entire operation. Can you trace who was actually sending them? We're working on it, but whoever set this up was smart about covering their tracks. The emails were sent using anonymous proxy servers and encrypted communication tools. It's going to take some time to unravel the technical side of things. More time. It seemed like everything in this investigation required more time. Time I didn't have while my name was attached to a multi-million-dollar fraud operation. Time I couldn't spare while my son was wondering why his mother was sleeping in the guest room and why strange men kept coming to our house to ask questions. What happens now? I asked, though I was afraid to hear the answer. Now we build a case, the investigator said. We've got the warehouse, we've got the financial records, and we've got testimony from you about the identity theft. The challenge is going to be proving that you weren't a willing participant in any of this. What do you mean? I mean that from the outside. This looks like a business partnership that went bad. You and your brother-in-law set up a company together, things got out of hand, and now you're trying to distance yourself from the consequences. We know that's not what happened, but proving it in court is going to require more than just your word. The weight of what he was saying hit me like a truck. Even though I was the victim here, even though I'd been the one to call the police in the first place, I was still going to have to prove my innocence. The fact that my name was on all those documents, that my signature was on all those forms, meant that I was guilty until proven innocent in the eyes of the law. How long is this going to take? I asked. Could be months. Could be years. Depends on how cooperative the other parties are and whether we can get them to flip on whoever was really running this operation. Months or years. That was how long I'd be living under the shadow of federal fraud charges. How long I'd be wondering if every knock on the door was someone coming to arrest me for crimes I didn't commit. That was how long Eli would have to deal with having a father who was under investigation by the FBI. The arrest happened on a Thursday morning while I was getting Eli ready for school. I'd just finished making his lunch when I heard car doors slamming outside, and something in my gut told me this wasn't going to be good news. Through the kitchen window, I could see 3 unmarked cars parked on the street, and I knew exactly what was coming. Dad, Eli looked up from his cereal bowl, sensing the tension in the room. Is everything okay? Yeah, buddy, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Just some more police stuff. Why don't you go brush your teeth while I handle this? The doorbell rang before he could answer, followed immediately by heavy knocking. When I opened the door, Detective Martinez was standing there with 2 federal agents I didn't recognize and what looked like half the Baltimore PD behind them. We have a warrant for the arrest of Bianca Thompson, Martinez said, holding up a folded document. Is she home? Bianca, not me. For a split second, I felt this weird combination of relief and heartbreak. Relief because they weren't here for me, heartbreak Because they were here for my wife, the mother of my child, the woman I'd loved for 10 years, even though she'd spent the last 6 months systematically destroying my life. She's upstairs, I said, stepping aside to let them in. Should I? Do you want me to get her? We'll handle it, one of the federal agents said. You might want to keep your son in his room until we're finished here. I nodded and headed upstairs to find Eli, who was standing in the hallway with his toothbrush hanging out of his mouth, eyes wide as saucers. Dad, what's happening? The police need to talk to Mom about some grown-up stuff, I said, guiding him back into his bedroom. I need you to stay in here until they're done, okay? Maybe watch some cartoons or play a video game. Is Mom in trouble? I looked at my 8-year-old son, this kid who'd already been through more trauma in the last week than most adults deal with in a year, and I couldn't bring myself to lie to him anymore. Yeah, buddy, she's in trouble. He nodded solemnly, like he'd been expecting this answer. Because of the box. Because of the box. I could hear voices from down the hall, Martinez explaining the charges, Bianca crying and asking if she could call a lawyer, the federal agents reading her rights. It was surreal, like watching a TV show except it was happening in my own house, to my own family. 20 minutes later, they let her out in handcuffs. She looked back at me as they walked her to the car, her mascara streaked down her cheeks, and for a moment I saw a flash of the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago. But then I remembered the smart speaker recording, the forged documents, the months of lies, and I turned away. Greg had been arrested the same morning at his apartment across town. According to Tyrell, who called me an hour after Bianca was taken away, Greg had tried to run when he saw the police cars coming. They'd found him 3 blocks away, hiding behind a dumpster like some kind of common criminal. He's already asking for a deal, Tyrell told me. Wants to give up his contacts in exchange for a reduced sentence. Problem is, most of what he's offering we already figured out from the evidence in the warehouse. What about Bianca? Her lawyers playing the innocent wife angle. Claimed she was manipulated by her brother and had no idea the extent of what was going on. Might work, might not. Depends on what else we find. The next few weeks were a blur of legal proceedings, paperwork, and more interviews than I could count. I had to take time off work to deal with all of it, which meant I was home when the reporters started showing up. Apparently, the story of a construction manager whose wife tried to frame him for art fraud was interesting enough to make the local news. I kept Eli home from school for 3 days until the media circus died down. The kid handled it better than I expected, but I could see the stress wearing on him. He'd gotten quiet, more withdrawn, and he'd started having nightmares about policemen coming to take me away too. The court proceedings dragged on for months. Bianca pled guilty to conspiracy to commit fraud, identity theft, and money laundering. But her lawyer managed to negotiate the charges down by arguing that she'd been coerced by Greg and other family members. In the end, she got 3 years in federal prison with the possibility of parole in 18 months. Greg's case was more complicated. The feds had evidence linking him to similar operations in 3 other states, and when they started digging into his financial records, they found connections to some seriously bad people. International crime syndicates, the kind of organizations that don't take kindly to their business partners getting arrested and potentially flipping on them. He ended up taking a plea deal that got him 5 years in exchange for cooperating with ongoing investigations. But even with the deal, I got the feeling that Greg was going to have bigger problems than just prison time. Word on the street was that his former business partners weren't happy about the attention his arrest had brought to their operations. For me, the legal nightmare finally started winding down about 6 months after that first phone call from the bank. The federal investigators concluded that I'd been an unwitting victim of identity theft, and all charges against me were officially dropped. My name was cleared, my credit was restored, and the various accounts and business registrations that had been opened fraudulently were closed. But clearing my name legally was different from clearing it socially. People in the neighborhood still looked at me funny when I walked to the mailbox. Coworkers still whispered when they thought I wasn't listening. And Eli still had to deal with kids at school whose parents had filled their heads with half-understood rumors about his criminal family. The day Bianca was sentenced, I sat in the courtroom gallery with Eli beside me, watching the judge read the charges and explain the terms of her punishment. She looked small and fragile in her orange jumpsuit, nothing like the confident woman who'd handed me that wrapped box on my birthday morning. When the judge asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, She stood up and looked directly at me. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely audible. "I never meant for it to go this far." But she had meant for it to go this far. That was the thing that still kept me awake at night. The whole plan had been designed to destroy my life if anything went wrong. I was never supposed to be a partner in their operation. I was supposed to be the fall guy. 18 months later, I'm sitting at the same kitchen table where this whole nightmare started, but everything feels different now. The house is quieter, not the tense, walking on eggshells quiet we had during those last few months with Bianca, but a peaceful kind of silence that comes from not having to wonder what fresh hell is waiting around the corner. Eli's gotten taller, lost that baby fat in his cheeks, and started developing the kind of smart-ass sense of humor that reminds me way too much of myself at his age. He's sitting across from me now, methodically working his way through a bowl of Lucky Charms while I nurse my second cup of coffee and read the sports section. Just another Tuesday morning in our new normal. The legal stuff is finally completely over. Last month, I got a letter from the federal prosecutor's office officially confirming that my name had been cleared from all related investigations. It was just a form letter, nothing fancy, but I framed it anyway and hung it in my home office next to Eli's honor roll certificate. Sometimes it's the boring paperwork that means the most. We've started new traditions, just the two of us. Sunday pancakes are mandatory. I make them from scratch now instead of using the boxed mix, and Eli has appointed himself the official taste tester. Friday nights are for chess, which he's getting scary good at. The kid's already beaten me twice this month, and I'm starting to suspect he's been studying strategy videos on YouTube when I'm not looking. The house feels lighter somehow, like a storm has passed, and the air pressure has finally returned to normal. I've repainted the kitchen, replaced the furniture in the living room, and gotten rid of most of the stuff that reminded me of Bianca. Not out of anger. That faded a long time ago, but because Eli and I needed a fresh start, and you can't build something new on top of a foundation full of cracks. I still think about her sometimes, usually when I'm lying awake at night, or when something on TV reminds me of better times we shared. The anger is gone, replaced by something more complicated. Sadness, maybe, for the life we could have had if she'd just been honest with me. Relief that Eli and I escaped before things got even worse. And a weird kind of gratitude, because going through hell together has made us closer than we might have been otherwise. Eli's handling everything better than I expected. Kids are resilient in ways that adults forget, and he seems to have inherited my ability to focus on what's in front of me instead of getting stuck dwelling on what went wrong. His grades are good. He's made new friends at school, and he started playing Little League again after taking a break during the worst of the legal proceedings. The only time he really talks about his mom is when he gets letters from her. She writes him once a month, always short notes about how sorry she is and how much she misses him. He reads them, usually doesn't say much about them, and then puts them in a shoebox under his bed. I don't know if he writes back. I've never asked, and he's never volunteered the information. Some things are between a kid and his parent, even when that parent screwed up as badly as Bianca did. My birthday came around again 3 weeks ago, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a little nervous about it. Not that I expected anything dramatic to happen. Lightning doesn't strike twice, and all that, but the date still carried some emotional weight. I was planning to just ignore the whole thing, maybe grab dinner with Eli and call it good. But when I came downstairs that morning, there was a small wrapped box sitting on the kitchen table. For about 2 seconds, my heart stopped. Then I saw Eli grinning at me from behind his cereal bowl, and I realized what was happening. "Don't worry, Dad," he said, trying to look serious but failing completely. "I packed this one myself." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in months. The sound echoed off the kitchen walls, and Eli started giggling too. And suddenly we were both cracking up over nothing and everything at the same time. I opened the box and found a coffee mug with "World's Okayest Dad" printed on the side, along with a handwritten note that said, "Thanks for believing me about the box. Love, Eli." This time, I opened it without hesitation. And this time, it was exactly what it appeared to be, a gift from someone who loved me, given with no hidden agenda and no strings attached. Just the way it should be.